All right, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're logging in from. Thanks for joining us today for this free webinar from Prevention Plus Wellness LLC, located in beautiful St. Augustine, Florida. And my name is Dr. Chudley Wirch. I'm CEO and founder at PPW. So today's 1 hour webinar, as you can see by the title, Healthy Youth Lifestyle Behaviors, Substance Use and Other Health Risks. That's what we'll be talking about. Lots of content today. And as usual, I'll be sending you these slides, and I'll be sending you a link to the recorded session, and both of them, the slides and the recorded session, please do share widely with your colleagues and friends throughout your region and state. Okay, I think this is really, really important information. So I will also send everyone at the end of today's session, sometime today, a email if you've registered, and that email will have an attachment. In addition to the slides, it'll be the 1 hour CEU certificate. Okay, so you'll be getting all that from me. No need to contact me. If you don't see it at the end of the day, look in your spam folder, because of the attachments, it's likely to have been sent your spam. Okay, let's go ahead and dive right in, because there's a lot that I'll be covering. Let me just check today. Morning. A couple of people said good morning, and thank you so much, and thanks for joining us. And so today's topics, objective specifically, we're going to be exploring connections between 3 key health behaviors: nutrition, and particularly regarding nutrition, breakfast eating, sleep duration, and physical activity duration. And we're going to look at those health behaviors in relation to risk habits, including substance use, violence, automobile safety, and actually a good number of other health risk problems among U.S. adolescents. And we'll be using the Youth Risk Behavior Survey data, most recent data, online 2019. So we're going to be looking at actual relationships or associations among these behaviors, looking at using those national high school data. Secondly, to sort of support what we find with the associations that we run, the analyses that we run, we're going to be looking at published research, individual studies, as well as reviews of studies that examine associations between health habits and substance use and other health risk behaviors. So we'll sort of fill in the gaps, and the research, I think, will help us understand the crosstabs that we'll be looking at from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey data. And then lastly, and actually throughout today's presentation, I'll be discussing with you practice implications for those of you that are substance use specialists, health providers, teachers, coaches, parents, etc. So lots and lots of good practical information will come out of today's session. So again, one more time, you'll be getting a PDF, a link to this recorded session, a certificate for 1 hour CEU. Welcome to today's session. Thank you all for what you do for youth and families in your region. And let's go ahead and take a look at what we have today. Let's start with health behavior prevalence and relationships. I find these data rather startling, actually, and sad that among high school adolescents in the United States, these health behaviors are so lacking among our typical adolescents. So for example, if you go to the far left column, you'll see the tallest column, that's 33%. A blue column, that's the percentage of high school adolescents that eat breakfast every day. So 1 in 3 high school adolescents eat a breakfast every day. And of course, we don't even know how the quality is of that breakfast. We don't know if it includes 3 or different types of foods. and whether it's really a healthy breakfast or not. And so just the frequency, the fact that only 1 in 3 high school students in the US get breakfast every day, I think is quite startling, since breakfast is so essential, as you'll see, to physical and mental health. And the same goes for all these other behaviors. Following that, 22% of high school adolescents throughout America get 8 or more hours of sleep. Some need more sleep. Sleep is medicine. 23% get the required amount of physical activity every day, which, according to CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and other organizations and agencies, is 1 hour. 1 hour of moving your body every day is essential for young people, and not even 1 in 4 American youth are getting an hour of physical activity every day. 29% are eating 2 or more fruits a day, and only 14% are eating 3 veggies a day. So you can see we've got tremendous amount of health risks, physical and mental health risks, as indicated by these behaviors: nutrition and sleep and physical activity. And what is their relationship? Well, I thought this is perhaps the most succinct mention of this. This comes from the Sleep Foundation, which identifies nutrition and exercise and sleep as the 3 pillars of a healthy lifestyle. And they're essential to youth, and they're essential to adults. And they influence each other in many and complex ways. And according to the Sleep Foundation, improving all 3 may be the best for physical and mental health maintenance and improvement for young people. So pillars of healthy life are nutrition, exercise, and sleep. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at that risk youth behavior survey data. We're going to start with tobacco use. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at relationships between tobacco use measures and these 3 key healthy lifestyle behaviors. That is, eating a breakfast and every day, getting 8 or more hours of sleep, and getting an hour of physical activity. And you can see that the measure we're looking at, the first measure of tobacco use, is ever using. This is lifetime smoking regular cigarettes. And if you look at the bottom of the chart, you can see breakfast on the left, then you can see sleep, then you could see physical activity. So that's what we're going to be looking at throughout these relationships. We're going to look at these 3 behaviors, these health behaviors: breakfast, sleep, and physical activity, in relationship to substance use and other health risk behaviors. So again, first we're looking at ever used cigarettes because we're looking at tobacco use. Let's take a look at the first 2 columns to the far left under breakfast. The blue column, the blue pillar, is yes, those individuals eat a healthy breakfast every day. The orange column is no. And again, the percentages on the top of those columns are the percentage who have ever used cigarettes or ever smoked cigarettes. So you can see for kids that have eaten breakfast, okay, 18.6% have smoked cigarettes. Those who don't eat breakfast, 26.7%. So you can see that's quite a difference. Those who ate breakfast, less ever smoking cigarettes. Those who didn't eat breakfast, greater percentage using cigarettes. The same kind of relationship is seen in the middle set of columns, pair of columns, for sleep. Those getting 8 or more hours of sleep, 18.9% reported smoking cigarettes sometime in their life. Those who didn't get that amount of sleep, 8 hours or more, 25.5%. So you can see greater ever smoking cigarettes associated with not eating breakfast, not getting adequate sleep, and no relationship for physical activity. Now, on the far right, you can look at the p-values. That's the probability values. So for those of you that may be interested in that, BF is breakfast, 0.0000, sleep 0.001. That's just the percentage of these findings being associated with a chance instead of a real relationship. So in other words, these very small numbers mean that these are very much likely real associations, okay? And so we see an association between ever smoking cigarettes and breakfast, ever smoking cigarettes and sleep. And let me just check the chat space here. Okay. I don't want to. By the way, as we go along, if you have questions, if you have comments, if something's not clear, if you want to make a statement, just type it in the chat space or the Q&A space. So what we're doing is we're looking at associations between tobacco use and the three key health behaviors: breakfast, sleep, and physical activity. And we first looked at ever using cigarettes. Now we're looking at smoking cigarettes before age 13, which is a good indicator of potential for problematic use and addiction. And we see only a relationship with breakfast, and that relationship is similar. Those who eat breakfast less likely to smoke before age 13. Those who don't eat breakfast every day more likely to smoke before age 18. Okay, no relationships between that measure of smoking cigarettes before age 18 with sleep or physical activity. Looking at a measure of smoking cigarettes, current smoking cigarettes, that's 30-day use as defined in the Youth Risk Behavior Survey data. And we see a relationship again with breakfast and sleep, not physical activity. And the relationship is the same. Those who eat breakfast, those who get 8 or more hours of sleep, are less likely to be current cigarette smokers than those who don't eat breakfast every day and those who don't get 8 or more hours of sleep. Smoking cigarettes frequently was associated just with breakfast. The numbers are so small you don't see anything there, but there is a statistically significant relationship. Frequent smoking was associated with breakfast, with those not eating breakfast more likely to smoke cigarettes frequently. Smokeless tobacco use. Again, we see a relationship between breakfast and sleep that seems to be protective in that eating breakfast and getting sleep is associated with less smokeless tobacco use, but an opposite association with physical activity. So this is the first time now we're seeing that physical activity or certain types of physical activity in particular may be associated with greater health risks. Here we see smokeless tobacco use, and for those that are getting 1 or more hours of physical activity every day, 5.3% use smokeless tobacco. Those who weren't as regularly physically active, 3.4% use smokeless tobacco. So greater physical activity was associated with greater use of using smokeless tobacco, that particular type of product. Not cigarettes that we've looked at, none of the cigarette measures, but smokeless tobacco. That's physical activity. Let's look at a related behavior, vaping e-cigarettes. Related, obviously, because vaping e-cigarettes was designed originally to replace those that are smoking, to help people wean them off smoking. And of course, vaping, like regular cigarettes, e-cigarettes like regular cigarettes include nicotine. So we're looking, first of all, at ever vaped in their lives, and we see a positive association one more time with breakfast and sleep, that being if kids, high school adolescents, again, these are actual data from across the country, Youth Risk Behavior Survey data around these crosstabs, and these are statistically significant associations showing that for those kids that ate, adolescents that ate breakfast, they're less likely to vape cigarettes than those who didn't eat breakfast. Those who get 8 or more hours of sleep, less likely to vape cigarettes than those who didn't get 8 or more hours of sleep. No association with physical activity. Okay, you can see a pattern here. Currently vaping, again, we see a protective effect with breakfast and sleep. And here again, we see the opposite, sort of a flipping, where those youth that are more physically active are actually at greater risk for vaping cigarettes currently, that's within the last 30 days, than those who are not as physically active, okay? So we see an opposite, a negative, if you will, or let's say, put it that way, negative association with a current vaping and regular physical activity. Frequent vaping, same kind of an association. Breakfast and sleep seem to have a potentially protective effect, whereas physical activity actually increases risk for frequent vaping cigarettes. Same thing with daily vaping. So what can we conclude from this? We looked at tobacco, we looked at vaping e-cigarettes, and so number one, eating breakfast every morning was associated with less risk of initiating, as well as currently using tobacco, and that was followed by 8 or more hours of sleep, while an hour of physical activity every day was linked to greater smokeless tobacco use among US adolescents. So number two, promoting breakfast eating on a daily basis could enhance tobacco use prevention among adolescents. That's 1 and 2. Number 3, breakfast eating and sleep were then found to be negatively associated. That means by negative, I'm talking about in a positive way, less e-cigarette use patterns, whereas physical activity was associated with greater e-cigarette use. So number 4, promoting breakfast and sleep again may have a positive influence on preventing e-cigarettes. And lastly, number 5, highly active adolescents may be at greater risk for smokeless tobacco use and greater risk for e-cigarette use, which indicates that teachers and coaches and parents should really focus on those kids that are highly physically active and realize they may be at risk for smokeless tobacco use and e-cigarette use. Okay, so that's conclusions looking at tobacco. Let's now look at alcohol use. We're going to see some similar associations as we did with some of the tobacco products and cigarette products. We see that looking at the measure of drinking alcohol before age 18, which is an indicator of potential real problems down the road and addiction for those youth. We see that breakfast and eating breakfast every day and getting sleep 8 or more hours, again, less likely to drink alcohol, whereas those who are physically active actually more likely to drink alcohol by age 13. Current drinking, that's 30-day drinking of alcohol, we see a protective effect by breakfast and sleep. In other words, one more time, kids that are getting 8 or more hours of sleep, less likely to be current alcohol drink users. Those that are eating breakfast every day, less likely to be drinking alcohol in the past 30 days. No relationship with physical activity on the measure of 30-day alcohol use. Same thing with binge drinking, a positive influence of breakfast and sleep on potentially preventing or reducing binge drinking among high school adolescents. And drinking 10 alcohol drinks in a row, heavy use of drinking, we see a positive association actually with all 3 behaviors, breakfast, sleep, and physical activity. That's alcohol use. Let's now look at cannabis use. And for those youth that reported ever using marijuana in their lifetime, those that ate breakfast and those that sleep, less likely to have ever used marijuana, no association with physical activity. Same thing with using marijuana before age 13, protective effect of eating breakfast and sleep. Currently using or 30-day use, again, protective effect of breakfast and sleep on preventing 30-day marijuana use. Using synthetic marijuana, same kind of a relationship, less likely to use synthetic marijuana if for among those kids that are eating breakfast and that are getting adequate sleep. And so let's wrap things up and conclude what we found out about these associations between alcohol and cannabis and these health behaviors. Number one, breakfast and sleep associated with less alcohol use, initiation, current use, binge drinking. So promoting breakfast eating, promoting getting adequate sleep could prevent alcohol use, okay? Could prevent. In addition to, obviously, we know these behaviors, breakfast and sleep, as well as physical activity, are just good for youth with regard to their overall physical and mental health. Number three, breakfast and sleep were associated with less risk for initiating and current use of cannabis use, as well as synthetic marijuana use. And again, promoting breakfast and sleep behaviors among youth may help protect against marijuana as it does for alcohol. Okay, so that's what those relationships showed among breakfast, sleep. Not much going on with physical activity as far as alcohol and marijuana. How about other substances? Looking first at non-medical opioid use, we see a positive relationship across three health behaviors. In other words, kids that are eating a breakfast every day, getting 8 or more hours of sleep, getting an hour of physical activity are less likely to have ever used prescription opioids. And current use, same thing. Now, I think this is interesting, especially with regard to physical activity, because we think kids that are highly physical active, and perhaps those, especially in sports, will be exposed to potential for injury, and injury could relate to opioid prescription, but we don't see that relationship. We actually see a protective effect of physical activity, sleep, and nutrition in terms of ever using and current use of prescription opioids. How about other drug use? We see the same positive relationship across all three health behaviors: regular physical activity, sleep, and breakfast, in terms of ever using illicit drugs, in terms of using hallucinogens, especially breakfast and sleep, nothing for physical activity. Again, using methamphetamines, positive results on breakfast and sleep, positive results on breakfast and sleep for cocaine use, and even a positive result for breakfast for steroids. Conclusions: breakfast, sleep, and physical activity were connected with less ever use and current use of non-medical opioids. And so really promoting all three of those behaviors: being physically active, eating a breakfast every morning, getting plenty of sleep, may help prevent opioid use among youth. Breakfast, sleep, physical activity are also linked to less ever using illicit drug use. Let's shift now to some other behaviors outside of substance use. Let's look at violence. There's some very fascinating relationships between the violence measures and physical activities. The first violence measure is carried a weapon, and we see, like we have in the past with our substance use measures, we see that eating breakfast and getting adequate sleep were protective and reduced the likelihood of carrying a weapon. But physical activity, being physically active, actually increased the risk of carrying a weapon, which is an interesting relationship. A similar thing with carrying a gun. We see a protective effect with sleep, and actually greater risk for those kids that are physically active for carrying a gun. So we see carrying a weapon and carrying a gun, we see increased risk among those kids that are most physically active. Getting into a physical fight, similarly, to the far right, you see kids that are most physically active, more likely to get into a physical fight, but also those kids that are eating breakfast, less likely to get into a physical fight. Threatened or injured in school, property, the protective effects by those that eat breakfast and sleep. Electronically bullied, we see protective effects across all three behaviors: physical activity, breakfast, and sleep. Bullied at school, protective effects of sleep and breakfast. Missed school due to feeling unsafe, really important to see this, because this is a missing school because you're feeling unsafe has an impact not just psychologically on the youth, but actually here on their learning and their development. And you can see that breakfast followed by sleep had a protective effect on reducing the numbers of kids who miss school due to feeling unsafe. Forced to have sexual intercourse, protective effect of sleep and breakfast eating. Experience sexual violence, sleep and breakfast again, protective effect, as well as experience physical violence during dating, protective effects of breakfast and sleep. So what can we conclude about and what are the implications for the violence measures? Breakfast eating and sleep are associated with less risk of a range of violence indicators, including carrying a weapon, being threatened or hurt on school property, being bullied or at school or electronically, missing school due to feeling unsafe, and even sexual violence. So breakfast and sleep, really, really, really important for the potential prevention of violence behaviors. Regular physical activity, on the other hand, was linked to greater risk of carrying a weapon, including a gun, and getting into a physical fight. So for those of you that are prevention and health specialists, promoting breakfast, promoting sleep, essential to violence prevention. Whereas those kids that are highly physically active, really those kids should be targeted for violence prevention, discussions about weapon carrying and about fighting. And that means for teachers and for coaches and for parents that work with youth that are physically active. And we're going to look at the research, so you're going to get a little bit better understanding of how these relationships, what's the mediating factor, what can help explain these negative relationships, particularly with regard to physical activity. Automobile safety, again, similar relationships, protective relationships for breakfast and sleep on the measure of not wearing a seatbelt, riding with a drinking driver and breakfast, driving while drinking, both sleep and breakfast. Texting, we see texting a little less likely for those eating breakfast and sleep, more likely for those that are physically active, more likely to text while that should be text while driving, by the way, not drinking, texting while driving. I'll have to change that. So breakfast eating, sleep, connected with less risk of not wearing a seatbelt, and driving while drinking and driving while texting, while as greater physical activity was associated with greater texting while driving. Okay. Let's look at other health problems and behaviors. Obesity, a critical health issue throughout the country for young people. We see protective effects across the board for all healthy behaviors. I want to highlight this. We see that those kids that eat breakfast, those kids that get sleep, those kids that are physically active, less likely to also have obesity. And it's reflected in this measure as well, not trying to lose weight, sort of a parallel measure, sort of an indicator, other side of the coin of measuring obesity. Let's look at some other nutrition measures. We see that not eating fruit is less likely among those that are breakfast eaters and physically active. That's a good thing. Physically active kids, those who eat breakfast, are also more likely to eat fruit. They're also more likely to eat vegetables. And so conclusion, physical activity, breakfast and sleep, all important to preventing obesity, also increasing fruit and vegetable consumption, and omit that sunscreen wearing thing. I'm going to delete that out. So really want to promote all behaviors, physical activity, breakfast and nutrition when it comes to increasing nutrition and preventing obesity. And here's a chart that sort of shows everything for you. If you look at the left-hand column, there's the risk behaviors that we've covered today, from tobacco and e-cigarettes all the way down to fruits and vegetables. And if we look at the next column, breakfast, we see breakfast is positively associated with all of those health behaviors. Substance use, if eating breakfast, less substance use, including tobacco, e-cigarettes, alcohol, marijuana, other substances, violence measures, automobile safety, obesity, fruit and vegetable consumption. So breakfast eating, critical to all of the other health behaviors. Sleep follows directly behind it, was also associated with all those behaviors with the exception of fruit and vegetable consumption. Physical activity, sort of a mixed bag. You had some real positive effects of being physically active with less non-medical opioid and other drug use, less obesity, more fruit and vegetable consumption, but greater e-cigarette use, greater, as we said earlier, we didn't check it off tobacco because not all tobacco, but greater smokeless tobacco use, and greater likelihood of carrying a weapon and physically fighting. So we see mixed findings with regard to those youth that are highly physically active. And if you look at research now, let's look at research between breakfast and risk behaviors. Here's a study of skipping breakfast and health compromising behaviors. It was an individual study, 16-year-old boys and girls and parents. And the finding here was that parents, their breakfast eating was the most significant factor with adolescent breakfast eating. So the message there, those of you that are prevention and health specialists, we do need to target the adults in the family, parents, to make sure they're modeling good breakfast eating. And you can see under number 4, the associations with skipping breakfast. They support what we've already looked at. If you miss breakfast, you're more likely to smoke. You're more likely to frequently drink alcohol, have a high body mass index, or be obesity, etc. This is a review. No, let's see. Is this a review? No, this is another study. Breakfast consumption and other health behaviors. This was a huge sample, almost 20,000 school-age kids in China. And they found that daily breakfast is really associated with a lot of health behaviors, physical activity, sleep, and so on, and negatively associated with cigarette use, alcohol use, just like we found in the analyses that we ran. So irregular breakfast consumption is a problem among adolescents, not just in the US, even in China. A review of the effects of eating breakfast concluded that it's just essential to the health and quality of life of young people. An analysis of skipping breakfast and health behaviors among college students across 28 countries found that skipping breakfast, even infrequently, was associated with a whole range of physical and mental health indicators. So really, even for young adults, college students, skipping breakfast is very much problematic for health, physical and mental. Bullying victimization and skipping breakfast, this sort of fills in the gaps a little bit, I think, and helps us understand how could there be a relationship between violence and nutrition, and breakfast in particular. Well, this study actually found a dose-response relationship. The more likely that students ages 11 to 19 years old in Canada, Ontario, I should say, specifically, the more likely they were to skip, the more likely that they were experiencing both school and cyber bullying. And the mediating factors seem to be stress, seem to be a psychological distress. So less eating, greater psychological distress, greater likelihood of being victimized in bullying. Fascinating potential linkage there. highlighting the importance of breakfast. In terms of sleep, there was just one very good review of sleep duration, which showed that the importance of sleep is essential relation to a whole bunch of other risk behaviors. This is a review of a bunch of other studies showing that sleep, not getting sleep is associated with greater alcohol use, drug use, smoking, violent behaviors, etc. Sleep critical to these other risk behaviors. And then physical activity, to help us understand this a little bit, use sports and aggression and violence. So some of the findings we're seeing with regard to kids that are highly physically active, an hour or more, may be linked to the type of physical activity, particularly types of sports. And here you see a review of studies that shows that there's a relationship between, if you look at number 2, the sport context, the social environment, the social agents, performance and winning, and those factors may have an influence on aggression and violent behavior. Particularly competitive sports, team-based contact sports were at higher risk for aggression and violence, which indicates that those parents and teachers and coaches need to really be on board with addressing violence prevention for when you're coaching youth in those particular types of sports, particularly team, contact, and competitive sports. We see this study, e-cigarette use and sports relationship, and we did see greater physical activity, greater e-cigarette use, and this could be, again, related specifically to team sports, competitive sports, as well as intramural sports. So it may not be physical activity in general, it may be physical activity of a certain type, especially certain kinds of sports that increase risk for violence, and in this case, even e-cigarette use, which again indicates that coaches should be addressing violence prevention, substance use prevention within the coaching of youth sports. Final conclusions. Number 1, health behaviors, particularly eating a healthy breakfast every day, getting 8 or more hours of sleep. Most nights are linked to less substance use, less violence, less obesity, and greater automobile safety. Getting an hour of physical activity every day was associated with less drug use, less obesity, greater fruit and vegetable consumption, but greater physical activity was also associated particularly with greater e-cigarette use, weapon carrying, and fighting, physical fighting. So prevention, health, fitness professionals, parents, coaches dealing with youth really need to promote all 3 wellness behaviors: physical activity, breakfast and nutrition, including fruits and vegetable consumption, sleep, essential to physical and mental health promotion and maintenance. But then those kids that are most active really should be targeted, particularly for prevention messages around vaping and around aggression. Okay, so that's it. Want to learn more? Go to our website, preventionpluswellness.com. You can request a sample of our programs. And our phone number here in St. Augustine, 904-472-5022, info@preventionpluswellness.com. Now, I'm going to open it up for Q&A and comments and see if you have anything. I need to edit a couple of slides I saw that are still a little dated, but really, really fascinating information here. The slides that we looked at looking at the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, these slides were supported in the research, and together they, I think, paint a picture of the importance of these wellness behaviors, particularly breakfast eating and sleep, followed by regular physical activity, and that some kinds of physical activity, maybe certain kinds of sports, may actually increase risks for certain health behaviors, particularly e-cigarettes and violence behaviors. Simply excellent. Again, thank you so much. My pleasure, Carmina. I appreciate those kind words. Thank you, thank you. Any questions, any comments? Does it make sense? Were there anything that didn't make sense? Let me know right now. I'm just looking at your comments, and I will again send everyone these slides. I want to make a couple of quick adjustments, send you the slides, send you the certificate and the link to this recording, and good stuff. So you can see why programs that we offer, prevention plus wellness programs, are so essential, because they integrate and they address not just substance use, but they promote physical activity, breakfast and nutrition, sleep and stress control. All of these behaviors are essential to the overall physical and mental development and protection of youth, not just in the United States, but you saw some of the research studies from Finland, from Canada, from China, similar relationships we're seeing throughout the world with regard to risk behaviors of youth and adolescents and young adults. Okay, any last chance if you have any questions? I just want to say again, as I always do, thank you. God bless you guys for all you do for youth and families in your region. You are the prevention and health heroes. You may not get the accolades that you deserve, but certainly I'd love to give it to you, because you are so important to parents and to youth. So thank you for what you do. If you need anything from us, please go to preventionpluswellness.com, drop in your email and name, and you'll be on an email list. And check out our programs and our training. And don't forget, under the heading of resources, there's a bunch of free stuff there, really good content for those of you that don't have an organization that may be able to afford anything at this point in time. So we address preventing substance use and promoting protective wellness behaviors. All of this is important to overall and positive youth development. That's what we do at Prevention Plus Wellness. Thank you all so much. I guess we're done. I don't see any other questions or comments. So you've been awesome. Have a great day. Take care of yourselves. And I hope to see you all next week, as we hope to have another free webinar next week. Let's see. Oh, there's a question. Thank you for the information. After years of making breakfast for my kids when they're elementary and middle school, I had no idea I was preventing substance use. That's what you were doing, potentially preventing substance use, not just promoting their overall health and well-being. So, and really difficult, I know, but parents play, as one of those studies showed, play such an important role. You show that you eat breakfast, that can have an important role, a modifying factor on influencing the breakfast eating of your kids. Can I be unmuted? I'm driving. Okay, well, everybody's going to be unmuted right now because I'm done. Have a great day, everybody. See you later. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.